So why two passports? Well, stop. Before you book your next flight, ask yourself, do you have a secret? Not a dark secret per se, but a travel secret. A document that unlocks doors that others can't see. We're actually talking about dual citizenship and the power of two or more passports. So, why do people have multiple passports? Simple. They're either born with it, inherit it, or they earn it through naturalization or investment. Having two passports means that you are legally a citizen of two or more countries simultaneously, just as in my case with the US and Italy. And no, I promise I'm not a stupid spy like Jason Bourne. So, why did I choose to have two citizenship? Well, I used to live in Europe in the past, and I was so amazed that anyone with an EU passport, such as Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and on, had the full ability to live, work, and study within the EU without any visa restrictions. At the time of living abroad, I only had my US passport, and I had to undergo through the visa process to legally allow me to live and work where I was living. It wasn't until years later when I found out that I was eligible for an Italian passport and I completed the citizenship by descent process. Before you ask me how to qualify for Italian citizenship by descent, well, let's just say at the time of this recording this video, it's up in the air, and that topic is for a completely different time. Okay, so what's really the advantage of having two more passports? Aren't they all the same regardless? Well, the answer is actually no. Not all passports are made equal. So, depending on where you're from, some passport holders may be required to obtain visas and meet other requirements to travel to a certain destination, while others may not. I'll share some following examples. But no, this is not legal advice, so always seek counsel for your situation. So, for example, with one passport hit the roadblock, the other opens up a lane. So, one might get into Europe, while the other one instantly locks Asia or South America. You can actually cut out months of bureaucratic delays and visa fees. So, for example, I went to Canada last year, and I used my American passport. If I had used my Italian passport, I would have been required to get a Canadian ETA, otherwise known as an electronic travel authorization. However, an ETA is not needed for US passports. Another example, if I want to visit Brazil, I would be required to get an e-visa on my American passport. However, it is not needed for my Italian passport. One more example. If I'm traveling to any of the EU nations, I would need to use my EU passports for unlimited stays. Heck, I could just even get a one-way ticket to Spain and get a job there if I wanted to. Whereas, I can only stay up to 90 days on my US passports, and I would need a return ticket home. And if I wanted to work in Spain, I would absolutely need to get a visa. You get the drift? Again, this is a very basic example, and you have a very small understanding why people do use different passports if they got them. Now, here's the biggest mistake dual citizens make not knowing which passport to use when traveling. So, think of it as a dance. Again, these are general guidelines and not legal advice, but based on my experiences, I like to break it down into two simple pieces. And honestly, it's far more simple than you realize. So, number one, the airline only cares about the passport you will use to enter your final destination, meaning where you're going. Number two, immigration officials, such as border control officials, only care about the passport that gives you the legal ability to stand on the land you are on now. Many of you know when you book an international flight, the airline will ask you for your passport information. This is to ensure that you can enter your final destination legally when you show up at Border Patrol there. If they allow you to board and fly without the correct travel documents meeting entry requirements, the airlines are on the hook to bring you, the passenger, back home and all associated expenses incurred with the deportation. The airlines will also receive substantial fines from the government. Plus, that's a surefire way to ruin your vacation. That doesn't sound fun at all, right? Now, typically, you can only enter one passport, especially if you book a round trip ticket. However, don't worry about this, because this can be updated when you check in online or when you stop by the airline counter on the day you travel. After all, the airline will still need to ask you for your passport anyway to cross-reference databases to ensure that you meet entry compliance. So, let's say you're going to a European country today. You're obviously going to show the airline your EU passport. Okay, you checked in, and now it's time to go through security and immigration exit control if this is applicable. Which passport do you use then? Well, you've got to use the one that gives you the legal status where you're standing on now. So, if you're in the US going to Europe, you're going to use the US passport because you have the legal right to be on American soil. Now, the US doesn't have any official exit immigration control like Europe does, but there are sometimes ICE random checks. So, if you use your EU passport here, questions could pop up such as, how did you enter the United States? Where is your ETSA or visa? How long have you stayed in the country? Etc., etc. Do you see how that can present an issue? Okay, it's now time to board the plane. Again, it's another passport check by the airlines. And remember, the airline only cares about the passport you're going to use to enter your destination. So you're going to show your EU passport because that's the one that you're going to use to enter Europe. However, again, if there are ICE checks, especially in the jetway, and I've seen this happen, you will show your American passport if asked. You fly, and you've had a great flight, and you finally made it to the EU. You will use your EU passport at border control. Okay, how does this process work coming back to the US? Well, it's simple, and it's the same, only except you're doing everything in reverse. So you're at the airline check-in. You're going to be showing the passport you're going to use to enter the country. So if you're going to go back to the United States, you've got to use your US passport. Because if you show your EU passport, you're going to get questions such as, do you have your ESTA or visa? None of these which apply to you. Now you're going to be at security and EU exit control. Now this is important. Since you entered Europe on your EU passport, you're going to use that same passport to exit because if you show your American passport here, especially at EU border control, you may get questioned by immigration authorities because there's no record of you entering in the country on the American passport. And remember, the EU passport is the one that gives you the legal right to stand where you are in Europe. Okay, it's time to board the plane again. And again, you're going to have another passport check by the airlines. Guess which passport you're going to use at this point. And if you said the US passport, you are absolutely correct because that's the one that you're going to use to enter the United States. You fly, and you had another fantastic flight, and you've landed in the US. It's very obvious that you know which passport you're going to use at this point, and it will be the US passport. And these are just general guidelines, but please make sure you seek counsel for your own situation. I hope this video gave you a basic understanding of how to use two or more passports while traveling. And if you liked this video, hit that subscribe button below. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.